Have you ever stopped to think about why some people seem to carry life with more ease? I'm not talking about people who have more money, not people who work less. I'm talking about people who face the same pressures as you: bills, deadlines, relationships, uncertainties, and yet somehow seem to wake up with a purpose you can't quite name. For years, Western researchers tried to understand what made the inhabitants of a small island in Japan live until 90, 100 years old, not just with their bodies functioning, but with bright eyes, with humor, with a will to be here. It wasn't genetics. It wasn't the climate. It wasn't luck. It was a way of seeing time, work, relationships, and even their own mistakes carried as second nature, passed down through generations, practiced in silence, without an app, without a guru, without a monthly subscription. Western science only recently put names to these practices. The Japanese have simply lived this way for centuries. Today, you're going to discover the 7 habits this people practice every day that cost absolutely nothing, but completely change the texture of your life. Millions of people live what psychologists call Sunday scaries, that anxiety on Sunday night before a week that makes no sense. You do what needs to be done, but you no longer know why. Life has become a sequence of tasks without purpose. Ikigai is not a grand life mission you discover on a 10-day spiritual retreat. It's something much simpler and much more powerful. The Japanese people of Okinawa Island, which has the highest concentration of centenarians in the world, practice Ikigai by answering 4 questions every morning. What do I love to do? What am I good at? What does the world need? What can I be rewarded for? The intersection of these 4 answers doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. Even if it's just 10% of your day dedicated to something that makes sense, the rest of life changes in texture. Western psychology calls this the self-determination theory, developed by DC and Ryan at the University of Rochester. It demonstrates that human beings need 3 elements for genuine intrinsic motivation: autonomy, competence, and purpose. Ikigai is exactly that, but formulated centuries before any academic paper. Studies with Okinawa inhabitants show significantly lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, in people who can articulate their Ikigai daily. Have you ever started a diet on Monday, a gym in January, an online course in March, and quit everything within 2 weeks? Western culture sold the idea that transformation requires revolution. Result: most people are paralyzed by a perfection that never begins. Kaizen is the Japanese philosophy used by Toyota, Sony, and cardiac surgeons around the world. The principle is brutal in its simplicity. Improve 1% per day. Just 1%. Want to read more? Read 1 page. Want to exercise? Do 5 minutes. Want to learn English? Learn 1 word. Kaizen doesn't ask for motivation. It only asks that you show up every day with a tiny improvement. 1% improvement per day results in being 37 times better by the end of a year. That's not a metaphor. That's mathematics. Neuroscience calls the mechanism behind Kaizen incremental neuroplasticity. Each small, repeated action strengthens the synaptic connections associated with that behavior. Psychologist B.J. Fogg of Stanford developed an entire methodology called Tiny Habits based on exactly this principle, and it proved more effective than any radical behavior change program ever tested. The brain doesn't resist small changes. It absorbs them silently and transforms them into identity. You post a photo and keep checking the likes. You buy new clothes and already feel you need more. You finish a project and only see what could have been better. The most connected generation in history is also the most dissatisfied. Perfection has become an invisible cage. Wabi-sabi is the Japanese habit of training your eye to find value in the imperfect. A cracked ceramic bowl, repaired with gold, the art of kintsugi, is worth more than an intact one because it carries history. A cherry blossom is treasured precisely because it lasts only days. The Japanese practice this actively. Instead of hiding the marks of time and use, they celebrate them. Apply this to your life. Your scar is part of your story, not a flaw to be corrected. Your small apartment has texture, not lack. Your imperfect voice tells a story no AI will ever replicate. Positive psychology calls this gratitude for imperfection, a central component of Martin Seligman's flourishing theory. Research shows that people with high tolerance for ambiguity and imperfection display greater levels of psychological resilience and lower incidence of generalized anxiety. Wabi-sabi is, in practice, a vaccine against paralyzing perfectionism, one of the greatest silent epidemics of the 21st century. Have you ever sat doing nothing for more than 2 minutes without picking up your phone? Probably not. We live in a culture of total filling. Every silence is uncomfortable. Every pause is unproductive. Every free moment must be consumed. The result is a brain that never processes, never integrates, never truly rests. Ma is the Japanese concept that emptiness is not absence. It is presence of another kind. In Japanese music, the silence between the notes is as important as the notes themselves. In architecture, the empty space of a Zen garden is not what's missing, it's what completes it. In daily practice, Ma means creating intentional pauses, sitting for 5 minutes doing nothing. Before starting work, walking without earphones, eating without a screen, letting the mind wander between one task and the next. It's not formal meditation, it's respect for the necessary space between moments. Neuroscience identifies what happens during Ma as activation of the default mode network, the brain's default mode network. For years, scientists thought this state was the brain at rest. They discovered it's exactly the opposite. It's when the brain consolidates memories, processes emotions, creates connections between information, and generates creative insights. People who never activate their default mode network because they're always consuming content have significantly reduced creative and emotional capacity. The modern work world has become a race of simultaneous multitasking, purposeless meetings, and mediocre results delivered at maximum speed. People do a lot and build little. They work hard and take pride in almost nothing. The sense of competence, one of the pillars of mental health, is in collapse. Shokunin is the habit of approaching any task, even the simplest, with full attention and an intention of excellence. Sushi master Jiro Ono, 98 years old, holds 3 Michelin stars and still massages the octopus for 45 minutes every morning. Not because he has to, because that's what the craft demands. You don't need to be Jiro. You need to find, in whatever you do, the gesture that only you do that way. Write the email with care. Prepare the meeting thoughtfully. Make lunch with presence. Shokunin is not about doing more. It's about doing with soul. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi described this state as flow. The flow state in which a person is so absorbed in a challenging and meaningful activity that the sense of time disappears and satisfaction is at its peak. Research shows that people who experience flow regularly have much higher rates of subjective well-being, less work exhaustion, and a stronger sense of professional identity. Shokunin is the Japanese path to flow, without needing a productivity app. The current generation was raised in a cruel paradox. At the same time resilience is preached, every difficulty is treated as trauma. Any frustration becomes a reason to quit. Any obstacle confirms that it's not for me. Low frustration tolerance is today one of the greatest predictors of failure in careers, relationships, and personal projects. Ganbatte isn't about being hard on yourself. It's about a cultural commitment to honest effort. In Japan, children clean their own classrooms, carry their own materials, and don't expect effort to be eliminated. They expect it to be valued. Ganbatte is said by Japanese people as encouragement before exams, competitions, and difficult moments. It doesn't mean you will win. It means give your best, and that is enough. It's a philosophy that separates the result, which you don't control, from the effort, which you control completely. Psychologist Carol Dweck of Stanford spent decades studying what separates people who thrive from those who give up. She named it the growth mindset. The central premise is identical to Ganbatte, believing that abilities are developed through effort, not given by talent. Studies with tens of thousands of students show that those taught with a growth mindset consistently outperform those considered more talented with a fixed mindset. Ganbatte is the growth mindset millennia before Dweck. We live in a culture of collective loneliness. We have never been so connected and yet never felt so alone. Social media created hundreds of superficial connections and destroyed the ability to cultivate deep bonds. At the same time, the obsession with private life made people stop caring for shared spaces, the neighborhood, the workplace, the community. Uchi-soto is the Japanese habit of maintaining a clear distinction between the intimate circle, family, close friends, trusted colleagues, and the external world, treating both with specific respect. In daily life, this manifests in concrete gestures: removing shoes when entering the home, physical separation between the outside world, and the sacred space within, talking about personal problems only with those who belong to the uchi, and treating public space with the same care as private space. This is why Japanese streets are clean without trash cans. Each person carries their own trash because the external space is also everyone's responsibility. Psychiatrist Robert Waldinger has been conducting since 1938 the longest longitudinal study on human happiness ever carried out, the Harvard Study of Adult Development. The conclusion, after more than 80 years of data with hundreds of participants: the quality of intimate relationships is the strongest predictor of health, longevity, and happiness, above money, fame, or intelligence. Uchi-soto is, structurally, the practice of intentionally cultivating exactly the kind of bond that science has identified as the most important in human life. 7 habits, 0 cost, millennia of wisdom. Ikigai, to have a reason to get up. Kaizen, to keep improving without stopping. Wabi-sabi, to stop punishing yourself for what is imperfect. To breathe between the moments. Shokunin, to do anything with soul. Ganbatte, to persist with dignity. And Uchi-soto, to cultivate the bonds that truly matter. The irony of modern life is that we spend more and more money trying to buy what the Japanese have practiced for free for centuries: therapy, productivity, mindfulness, coaching. All of that has value, but the foundation came first, and it costs nothing. It starts now, with 1% of change, with a 5-minute pause, with a cracked bowl you decide not to throw away.